Welcome back to another episode of Inside Access Control, sponsored by SIA. Very, very excited today to have Nicolas Waern join me. He is the Smart City Shaper, as his LinkedIn profile has, and he'll get into exactly what that means, from a company called Winio. So thank you, Nicolas. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me be here. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to talk to someone that is part of the building segment, but not necessarily where I operate. So I think this is going to be a phenomenal episode. I hope so.
I hope so too. But I mean, if anything, based off of our initial conversation before we even started recording, I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
So, before we jump into all that,
Sure.
Can you just give a little bit of background on yourself? I've been enjoying what you're writing and what you do on LinkedIn. So I think we good for everyone to hear.
Yeah, so my name is Nicolas Waern, like Lee said, and I'm based in Sweden, originally from Colombia. So I came here when I was 10 months old. So I'm not going to go the full story, obviously, but I got a background in international management through my studies. I've also worked in sales, logistics, a little bit of that, this and that. But I stumbled upon or into the building automation segment about 5 or 6 years ago. That was after I sort of pursued my bachelor in international management and a master in IT management, studying in South Korea, also in Switzerland, and investing in an audiobook startup out of Nigeria, of all places. So it's just one of these things. I like to say yes to a lot of different things, and then I try to own up to it. So I'm pretty lazy originally. But when I say yes to something, my sense of honor is higher than my laziness. So that's sort of how I fall into the trap of doing a lot of different things. So building automation, I've been doing that for about 5 to 6 years. So hardware, software, cloud, backnet, smart buildings, all of that kind of stuff. Also IoT, Internet of Things, and advising large companies. Also worked as a management consultant, have my own web agency. So a bit of an entrepreneur. Also, my previous engagement was as acting CEO of this IoT company out of Iceland that had this Raspberry Pi based PLC or like smart controller. It wasn't a PLC. Sorry about that, TJ. It was actually a piece of hardware software combination that was open in its nature. So you wanted to place it in the building, and whatever from backnet or like the building automation side coupled with the IoT side, what's actually absorbed underneath one umbrella. So you get one API to the building, which was really groundbreaking because it was based on an open protocol, which was backnet, of course, the world's largest building automation standard. And that had the possibility and still have the possibility to again, like create like the merge between the old stuff, backnet necessarily, form that to a RESTful API, as well as with the new stuff, but still having it in the same context. So I was the acting CEO for that company, but now for the last year, I've been consulting around digital twins, smart city consultancy, where I advise decision makers on how to get started, get going, and succeed with digital transformation efforts around the world. So one of my biggest companies, or one of my biggest customers, I would say, it's not my company, is GC, general contractor from the US, where I'm helping their smart building team on how to create smart from start. And of course, I know a lot about smart buildings and what the end product, so to say, should look like. So that helps me in helping them to build actually smart from start and what that should entail in terms of openness, integrations, future-proof buildings, and future-ready facilities, of course. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of what I do. And I'm very agnostic in, again, like I know a lot of different things in this space, I would say.
That's good. No, and actually, now that you triggered me to remember, I think one of the first things I read about was backnet. You wrote something specifically around, because at least my experience with it, it gets I would say a bad rap from it not necessarily being the ability for the future. It's somewhat of an afterthought technology, but you had a piece that it was actually because of you think about the install base, but then also how to properly use it, if you would, to be able to do some of the stuff that the smart cities want, that it actually still has life.
Absolutely. No, I think again, it covers 60% of all large commercial real estate in the world, right? Especially in the US. However, of course, because it's an open standard, it has its pros and cons. It's inherently very, very open. So it needs someone else to sort of plug the security holes. But at the same time, it is open, so integration is made possible, and extracting data is very, very easy to do in a standardized way, right? But of course, the biggest problem, so this is a myth as in getting the data out of buildings, that's not necessarily a challenge. But getting the data out, massaging it, and turning data into information, information to insight, insight to action, action to impact, and then having that data or like information sent back to the building and changing control strategies. That's the difficult part because of vendor lock-in and all these kind of things. So you have to use the actual technology and solutions that are already in the building, because then it comes with the vendor lock-in. Then that's the problem, right? So getting data out, figuring out where problems are is not necessarily that difficult. It's doing something about it in an interoperable and holistic way. That's still a very large challenge where you have like these 1,000 cuts problems.
Yeah, let me take a sort of a contrarian view on. I just
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that like I don't, as I sit here right now, right? It's hard to imagine seeing the world uniting around a single one. So if that, let's just say let's say it's moving in that direction, right? So
In what direction? In what direction?
let's say it's the adoption that everyone is going to wake up tomorrow and they'll say, we're going to adopt the open standard and use it and go. Let's just.
No one's going to do that. No one's going to do that.
But just play with
Yeah.
me for a second.
Yeah, okay. Everyone's going to do that. Yeah.
But then there's the reality of the practicality of sort of today versus tomorrow of that happening. So
yeah.
What have you seen, or what do you recommend? So if I'm an access control provider or security provider or visitor management that wants to participate, what is my quick that I could do now to put myself in the best position to participate in that while I build that out?
I think that's a phenomenal question. With hopefully a good answer as well. So first off, I think the appearance or that there are industry standards is phenomenal, right? However, I just wrote a post today again about I don't believe that everyone is going to converge around a single standard. So I would definitely recommend using solutions that can do the opposite and work with the standards that exist or the data that exists, but mapping it to an ontology or a framework that makes sense of the data in the world as it is from different products or different locations. But the immediate answer before going into that rabbit hole is definitely have a look at, okay, what are the most prevalent standards in the building space or whatever space that you want to go into? Adhere to those standards, because even though there are other frameworks or other things that might be actually better from a technology standpoint, the fact is there are people, there are processes, it's culture, it's all these existing systems that might not be able to do these kind of things. And it's still like a people-to-people business, right? So it's still people making decisions. And if they see that a new product has this like backnet interoperability or Modbus or open standards or whatever it is that's coming out, of course, it's a better likelihood of success rate in doing the integrations because yeah, this one is open or you got open APIs. Maybe that's the simple answer, right? If you got a product and then you have a standardized way for others to integrate to it with open APIs in any shape, way, or form, and you have documentation around it, that's definitely a good start, I think. So
beautiful. No, I think you're dead on, and that is the way, because the utopia is that everyone will do it. The reality is, like you said, it probably won't happen for whatever reason, good and bad. But the other part that I love what you said there is, like, a lot of this, especially in the building side, we like to always fix everything technically, but majority of the time it's a human thing, an opportunity, a problem, whatever it might be, and getting past the self-awareness or the emotional intelligence to see a better vision of what it could be, and then getting into the work about have open API. So I love that as an answer. Question for you, as you work all over the world and you see the different pockets of marketplaces moving to more of a smarter city, where do you see the most traction right now? Is it in I don't know, transportation? Is it in high rise? Like where are you seeing the biggest movement?
So I think like the smart city space, it depends. Like, is it for real? Is it not for real? In what terms, right? So manufacturing, I see that there are a lot of things happening. They've been trying for a long time. So Industry 4.0 initiatives, they have the money, they have the sense of urgency. They're doing AI stuff that doesn't really scale. They're not getting the impact that they should. And even though everyone is working in silos, they don't necessarily see like the scalable aspects of it, right? In terms of real estate, smart buildings, I think it's very, very early on. In terms of construction, I think it's maybe even more early on, to be honest. Smart city from the high level, I think there are a lot of things happening in pockets in specific cities to various extent. From an access control standpoint, of course, I was studying in South Korea, and I know that they're having like the whole smart city surveillance perspective under control, so to say, and maybe even more so in China, right? From a surveillance perspective, all these kind of things. So I think there are a lot of things happening everywhere, especially Asia. I know that Singapore has been predominantly, they have been really, really successful in what they've done. I think, however, I hope there's not a lot of Singaporeans listening, but maybe there are. I think they're stagnated a bit, and there are other countries and cities that are going at it right now, basically leapfrogging a little bit. So they're using newer technology, faster time to market to do these kind of things. So as an example, I was in a call this morning with Unreal, so the gaming company. They have the gaming engine. So they're turning into like the source, like the gaming engine behind these smart city initiatives. So you're actually mapping the real world into a gaming world. So we're seeing like a merge basically of, well, all these game companies or like these games that have this phenomenal graphics. That's actually what's turning into the engine behind new smart city initiatives to form these digital twins. So you're mapping real-time data, mobility aspects. So one of the more interesting ones that I heard this morning was, so you take a city, you map it with GIS data, and then, well, you basically build it sort of a digital twin of the city, and then you take information from the hospitals, and then you take maybe stuff from the mobility aspects as well. You plug that into a database, you have the correlation, so you can see, okay, we have full capacity here, but we don't have it here. And then they can just like triangulate or like see in real time, okay, where should we go with these patients and all these kind of things, right? So it's all of these things together. And I would say that I don't necessarily think the North America is the leader in this aspect. I would definitely say that it's Asia and different parts of Asia, of course. They're leading this race. And I know that, yeah, I think so. That's the short answer.
We see it. I mean, from an access control point of view, Singapore does come up all the time when it comes to the adoption of more digital technology around the access control side, especially in the consumer residential side, or the adoption from the mobile end. So we see that as well. Something you mentioned that is a term that seldom used within the access control industry, but I do hear it a lot from everyone that I follow or interact with on the smart cities, is the digital twin aspect of this. Can you explain just high level, what is digital twin, and what value does it create?
Yeah, I'll try to do it short.
Everybody, I know that's not, it's like,
No. I think like, I mean, you ask 10 digital twin so-called experts, right? And you get 50 different answers. So I'll give my perspective of what a digital twin is, maybe what it has been, what it is, and what it will be. So what it has been from the construction space, that I think that's where it's originated, or maybe it was even before that in product development when you had these jet turbines for airplanes, right? And you wanted to do calculations to see how they would perform in the air, because it's not necessarily wise to see how they perform in the air and building it and then crashing and building it and crashing it. So they build a 3D replica with CAD models and how the engine would look like, and then running simulations against that 3D replica to figure out how it would behave, air currents and all these kind of things. So very, very specific for a certain part of maybe the airplane or the whole airplane, right? So that's sort of like the concept of digital twins, where it's coming from, I believe. And then from the construction space, you're using it in terms of BIM files, so building information models. And IFC is a standard. There's an ASCII-based standard that is very, very, it's too nitty gritty. Anyway, so construction, BIM files, building information models, you're using it, so you're building sort of like the digital twin first. So because traditionally when you're doing construction project, you're changing a lot of stuff on site, which is pretty, well, it's stupid, right? Because if you build the digital twin first, you don't have to do it, because then everyone coordinates in the digital twin space, all at the same time. And that's what sort of like makes it happen. So the cost is increasing in the beginning, but not during the construction process.
Yeah, but what do I do about all my change orders? I'm kidding.
You don't. You don't.
I get that. But it's interesting when I think about digital twins, specifically in the access control side, and you talk about simulations, this actually sounds like a good opportunity, because now density is becoming a term that we use a lot within access control, like how many people are in the space, how many people
Yeah,
are
of course.
into it. And
Yeah,
then the system's responding to that situational awareness to basically say, you can't let
yeah,
anybody else in or let them, right? So this
yeah.
ability to now, if we're going to be mapping those places and density is an issue, it sounds to me like a good way of utilizing digital twins to have a good idea whether you need to make the hallways a little bit bigger or pull,
Absolutely,
depth
absolutely.
out, right? So, okay.
I mean, it's done to run simulations. So the construction side, that's what it's sort of like, I mean, being used to, right? So you have the digital twin, you want to build the digital twin first and then build the building so you don't have these change orders. So you have the, let's say you have the visual aspects of it. And then you want to tie more data sources to it to create it like a real-time connected digital twin. But this is where so like it differs, or where the problem is. So if you're looking at it from a real estate lifecycle, so even if you build a digital twin for the construction project, it's very, very seldom that that gets used during the entire lifecycle. So most of the time, or a lot of the times, that digital twin with a lot of information of the assets, where they are in the building, that would be a gold mine for FM companies or facility management companies, or during the whole sort of like operating phase of the building, is just thrown in the trash can. It's never being used again, except in the construction project. I'm crying inside when I'm talking about this, because there's so much value that gets built up during the construction process, and that's not being used. So then you have the other side of the digital twin, which is the data wrangling. So like all the data sources that need to come together from different sources with different metadata, talking different languages, and all these very different things need to come together to form like the basis of the digital twin. So in the call this morning with Unreal, they also said like, yeah, the digital twin, a real digital twin, so to say, is like 10% visual stuff and maybe 90% data coming in from different sources. So that's a lot of the problems what we're seeing, right? So some of the companies that say like, yeah, we already have a digital twin, but they might not have the visual aspects, or they have the visual aspects but not the data aspects. So what is happening right now, based on sort of like, again, like, so that is maybe where we are today, but what is coming in the future is those real-time connected complete digital twins that has the ability to not only bridge together data from different sources, so IoT, access control, lighting, BMS, BAS, all the stuff that goes on in a building, but actually present that at a visual representation. Because, and why this matters is really, 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 really important, right? Because no one really gets this stuff. Because the ones that are just doing the visualization stuff, they think that's more important than the data. The ones that are doing the digital twin data, they say that the visualization stuff, that's just fluffy. We don't need that stuff. But the problem is when you're trying to collaborate, communicate around a one true source, the skill shortage gap, so to say. Because the system access controls guys, or girls for that matter, maybe they want to explain to someone else what they're doing. But that's a problem, right? How does this fit into the context of BAS, BMS, lighting, and all of these things? Well, it's challenging. It's challenging to do that. And then you have BAS trying to do the same thing. You have lighting trying to do the same thing. Well, what if they would do this in a one true source that is the same for all of them, which is a defined digital twin that is locked in time and space? That is something that everyone can agree on, because that is the building. So then we can say, yeah, okay, Lee, you take this part. Then we can sort of like heat map, okay, this is where the access control is. Then we put in the data from, well, how people are moving, and then the BAS, the lighting, and all these kind of things. So we can actually communicate, collaborate, and research and development around the same thing. But then you can't have just the visual part, and you can't only have the data part. So these need to come together. And that's basically where the digital twin movement is moving. But we're very, very like at the cutting edge, and there's very few companies that can do this at scale. I know maybe one or two companies.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, what I'm seeing happen in our industry is the single value proposition we had before was primarily around keeping people safe, keeping bad people out.
Yeah.
And we're now seeing this big movement into building operating systems, and which I think has moved beyond just building management systems, but like what you're talking about is more of an operating system for a building, and leveraging the digital and physical to go do that. And access control is becoming a feature of that sort of building operating system. Yeah.
No, I think more and more people are just understanding that a building is actually that, right? It's a building. and its purpose should be that it's actually catering to some kind of productivity, well-being, or whatever KPI there is for the tenants that are using that building. So again, it's going back to Vitruvius virtues. A building has to be robust, useful, and attractive. So it's not these different silos that has been sort of like put together and to be this building that we've seen. And BAS, BMS, I mean, historically that has been the HVAC side of things, or energy side, energy focus, reducing energy. But now when there's no people in the buildings, it's again turning into a people focus, right? So again, what are their needs? How well does the entire building, how does the entire building cater to the needs of these tenants? I think that's what we're seeing more and more and more, which of course brings more focus into looking at it from a holistic perspective. And again, realizing we can't do this in silos. We are doing it in silos, but how can we collaborate? In my opinion, is of course through digital twins. That is the one true answer to basically everything. Then whether it's backnet or all these kind of things inside, doesn't really matter. These digital twins can encapsulate and absorb data from everywhere. I mean, irrespectively where the data is coming from, where it's going, and you can use the same systems that you've always been using, but you can actually make sense of it together in real time and very, very scalable.
I love it. No, I think I couldn't agree more. So on that, I have a feeling you and I could probably talk for another hour, but if people want to find out more information about you and dig into this, where's the best place to do that?
LinkedIn, I would say. But if I may, I have another one through access control, which I think is interesting.
Do it.
If it's interesting, yeah. So it's again through this invite to innovate concept, right? So before you choose something, you had to live with it for 20 years. Now, when you see this operating systems for building or operating whatever, you're building a platform for the future where you can invite companies to innovate, but if you don't want to use it, you can just sort of like throw them away. So like with the API and plug and play aspect. So one of the companies that were actually part of smart city tenders, it's exactly that platform. So they enable a platform on top of existing cameras. So, and they build that to enable others to sort of like come in and build these decentralized apps that are based on a common data source. So let's say you have a camera infrastructure for a city, and you already have like the camera infrastructure. So instead of ripping, replacing, and installing new cameras that are much smarter, you actually just install a new platform on top of it. So it's just on the edge. So it's not the cloud. So you're saving a lot of money as well. And it makes real time. And these COVID compliance use cases, which I can send to you maybe in the show notes, is basically it takes images or it does all the things, but in anonymous data at the source. So whenever the data is leaving or coming into the camera, it's just anonymous data. So from a privacy perspective, it's really, really interesting. And then you can use the platform to do it from COVID compliancy. But then if you want to use it to do something else, you just build that app on the platform. So it's nothing new in terms of a new service or a new vendor or anything like that. It's just like building another app on top of the same platform. So I think that's the future as well when it comes to sort of like bridging the gap or flipping, sort of like reverse engineering how it has been in terms of vendor lock-in and what it should be for the future as well.
Yeah, which I like because it just changes the paradigm. And I think the key aspect that you talked about earlier is the human centricity side of this, where it's now shifting to the people inside the building and how they're doing it. And it's a bigger value proposition than just healthy buildings, if you would, from an HVAC standpoint, and green.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the holy grail is definitely people.
Yeah.
It always has been, but now I think there's a sense of urgency that, I mean, we've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, health is a wonderful equalizer, I think, in all of that.
Yeah.
So, and people want to get back to work and the rest of it. So it just makes total sense. So no, I appreciate that, and I think I think you're right. So, well, thank you, Nicolas. I really appreciate you taking the time to share a bit. Hopefully, maybe we can do this again and talk a bit more. Because again, I
absolutely.
think we know
same time tomorrow or when. Yeah.
Like, you're on that side. I think you're trying to go on vacation. So
yeah, I'm trying. I shouldn't have said that, but I mean, let's definitely keep in touch. And thanks so much for this opportunity.
No, you too. Thank you.